Hey, it's Yakov, and you're watching the Swift Bird. Apple's WWDC has just happened, and it brought a ton of new features and improvements for both regular users and developers. Heck, it brought an entirely new operating system. In this short video, I'll tell you about my favorite updates of this year's WWDC from a developer's perspective. I should mention that I haven't had much time to play around with them, so my experience is mostly based on the keynote and platform State of the Union presentations. I guess I'll have an in-depth video later this month, so subscribe to the Swift Bird. Besides subscribing, you can support my channel by liking this video if you find it helpful, sharing it with your developer friends, or sponsoring me at the links below. With that said, let's have a look at the top 5 announcements at WWDC 23. Number 5 on my list is the new modular way of downloading Xcode. Last year, Apple already reduced the download size by roughly 40% by making watchOS and tvOS runtimes available as standalone components. This year, the iOS SDK and simulators are becoming separate components as well. So if you don't develop for iOS, you only need to download 3 GB instead of 10. Best of all, you can now construct your own Xcode bundles on the developer portal. This is helpful if you need to deploy the app on multiple computers at once, like work and personal. That way, you'll only need to download the files once, and then you can send them between computers with AirDrop or host them on the local network. Next on my list are code editor improvements in Xcode 15. At Platform State of the Union, Apple promised that code completions are now more accurate and relevant to the surrounding code. Whether it's true, I can't say only after a couple of hours of testing. But what I can say is Xcode 15 was able to build my project without a single change. That's not something I'm used to seeing in the very first Xcode beta. So, good job, I guess. Another Xcode thing Apple highlighted is improvements to source control management. Xcode always sucked at it, and honestly it continues to do so in the new version. Many useful features like line-by-line staging are still missing, and switching from a model window to a tab for committing doesn't feel like a big improvement, so I'll probably continue using GitHub Desktop for now. Updates to the testing tools seem nice, but I haven't been able to take advantage of them, because Xcode showed me no insights or patterns or whatever it calls them. Right in the middle of my top 5 list are Swift macros. Before today, you already had property wrappers and function builders. These are tools that allow you to encapsulate behind-the-scenes logic and reduce the amount of boilerplate code. Swift 5.9 adds macros to the toolkit. Although all the tools in this collection share the same goals, Swift macros are pretty different in how they work and what they enable you to do. Unlike property wrappers, Swift macros are evaluated at compile time. That means you can validate your code and get warnings even before you build it. Who doesn't like Xcode warnings, right? Macros can be attached to other symbols just like property wrappers, or be freestanding expressions. One of the most obvious use for macros is validating URLs. Instead of relying on optionals at runtime, with macros you can make sure your hard-coded URLs don't contain any invalid characters just as you type the code. If something's wrong, Xcode will notify you the same way it does when you attempt to reassign a constant value. In my experience as a software developer, I learned that the fail-fast approach is one of the best efficiency tips. Swift macros deliver exactly that. If something's wrong, you'll learn about it more quickly, get less confusion, and spend less time investigating the issue. Macros are a big part of the upcoming Swift 5.9 version, but it's just one of the features, and there are more. Let me know in the comments whether you'd like a separate video on the new Swift features, like the one I made about Swift 5.8. Also, subscribe to the channel to stay tuned. Number 2 are updates in Swift UI. I hope they'll make the framework more ready to completely replace UIKit, but that is something I say every year. This year's changes in Swift UI include a simplified data flow, with state and environment attributes being the only ones you'll need. Besides that, the observable attribute at object level lets you remove the published attributes from individual properties. But probably the biggest thing this year is expanded support for animations. Swift UI now lets you define separate phases in element transformations, or set up keyframes to change individual properties over time. The updated SF Symbols package ships with predefined animations which you can trigger from code, and I believe this last thing is not limited to Swift UI. And finally, at the top of my list is Swift Data. If you're familiar with Core Data, you know that it's not the easiest framework to learn and use. First introduced in macOS 10 Tiger, it hasn't changed much up until today. In many situations, it relies on string literals, which provide no compile time validation and no protection against typos. If you make a mistake in the predicate expression, you'll learn about it only when your app crashes. Swift Data is the Core Data alternative, built in Swift and for Swift. That means it follows the same principles that guide the development of Swift itself. Swift Data is fast, modern, and safe. It relies on the new macros features, as well as the technologies you're already familiar with, like the Codable protocol. Swift Data doesn't use separate files for modules, and because of that, it doesn't require you to declare the same data structures twice. Apple says that Swift Data was designed with SwiftUI in mind, so integrating it shouldn't take much effort, which you can't say about Core Data. But just as Core Data, the new framework supports common scenarios such as undo and redo out of the box. One major downside of Swift Data is that it's only available in the new OS releases, so you have to either drop support for older versions right now or wait a couple years until you can do so without affecting many users. To be honest, I wasn't expecting much from this year's WWDC. I'd seen some leaks over the past weeks and none of them seemed very exciting. But in my opinion, it is one of the most promising years for everyone who develops software for Apple platforms. WWDC is still in progress as I'm recording this video, so we'll probably have more details by the end of this week. Right now, I can give you this timeline. You'll be able to use the new Swift features such as macros already this fall when Swift 5.9 ships with Xcode 15. But the new APIs will probably take longer to adopt because they only support the latest platform versions. For me, that means that Swift Data and SwiftUI animations won't make it to my work projects until a year or two later. But that shouldn't stop you or me from building something brand new, right? And that brings me to the end of this video. I gave you my top 5 list of announcements at this year's WWDC, but you don't have to agree with me. I'm very interested in what caught your eye, so leave a comment down below. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. Also subscribe to the Swiftboard for more software and tech stuff. And consider sponsoring this channel at the links in the description. I'll see you later, and until then, have a great time.